Before you give me her address, the old man said, answer one question. Does she still smile when she talks about the ocean? The broker on the disposable phone gave an impatient sigh. What does that have to do with the contract? Daniel Hayes looked through the rain-speckled windshield toward downtown Seattle. Ferries crossed Elliott Bay beneath a low ceiling of gray clouds. Beyond them, glass towers reflected a city going about its ordinary afternoon, unaware that a decision made inside an aging pickup truck was about to alter several lives. It tells me whether you found the right woman, Daniel replied. A pause followed. Then the broker said, Claire Whitmore, 32 years old, 7 months pregnant, waterfront penthouse. Security file is being transmitted now. Daniel closed his eyes for half a second. Claire. The name carried 26 years of birthdays he had watched from a distance, photographs he had kept hidden, and apologies he had never been allowed to deliver. What does the client want, he asked. A permanent solution. It must look accidental. No public scandal, no connection to the husband, and no surviving witnesses. Daniel's voice remained steady. And the child? The client considers the pregnancy part of the problem. Something cold settled behind Daniel's tired blue eyes. Send the file. The call ended. Daniel removed the battery from the prepaid phone and dropped the device and battery in a separate trash bins outside a deserted marina. To anyone passing by, he looked like a retired dock worker in a faded baseball cap and weathered brown jacket. No one would have guessed that the criminal world once knew Daniel Hayes as a man who could enter a guarded building, complete an assignment, and disappear without leaving enough evidence to prove he had ever been there. No one would have guessed that he had walked away from that life decades earlier. Most importantly, no one would have guessed that the woman named in the contract was his daughter. He returned to the pickup and opened the encrypted file on a small tablet. Claire's photograph appeared first. She stood outside a Seattle charity gala wearing a dark green dress, one hand resting on the curve of her pregnancy. Beside her was her husband, Brandon Whitmore, smiling for the cameras. Daniel enlarged Brandon's face. Successful entrepreneur, civic leader, major donor, founder and chief executive of Whitmore Holdings. A man who had just paid a broker to erase his wife and unborn son. Daniel scrolled through Claire's daily routine, medical appointments, apartment access codes, vehicle information, and security arrangements. The file contained details that could only have come from someone inside Brandon's organization. At the bottom was a proposed completion date, 12 days. Daniel copied the file onto an encrypted drive and sent a short message to a number he had not used in years. I have evidence connecting Whitmore Holdings to an active murder-for-hire conspiracy. I need a confidential meeting. The reply came less than a minute later. Special Agent Maya Torres. Same protocol. Same location. Midnight. Daniel shut down the tablet and looked again at Claire's photograph. I couldn't protect you when you were a child, he whispered. I won't make that mistake twice. Across the city, Claire Whitmore stood barefoot inside the bright kitchen of a waterfront penthouse, arranging white lilies in a crystal vase. Morning sunlight reflected across polished marble countertops, while soft piano music drifted from hidden speakers. One hand rested against her stomach. 7 months. Her doctor wanted her to slow down. Her friends insisted she was glowing. Lifestyle magazines described her marriage as one of Seattle's modern success stories. Sometimes Claire almost believed them. Brandon entered the kitchen wearing a tailored navy suit. He kissed her forehead, poured himself coffee, and checked a message that appeared briefly on his phone. The warmth vanished from his face for less than a second. Claire noticed. She had begun noticing many things lately. Late-night calls taken on the balcony. Meetings added to his calendar without explanation. A new security team that reported directly to Victor Hale, Brandon's longtime chief of security. Conversations that stopped whenever Claire entered the room. Big day, she asked. Board meeting, Brandon replied. The auditors are becoming dramatic. I thought the review was routine. It is. His answer came too quickly. Claire had recently received an email from Whitmore Holdings' outside accounting firm asking her to confirm several digital authorizations. Her name appeared on corporate documents connected to companies she had never heard of. Brandon had dismissed the email as an administrative mistake. Claire had wanted to believe him. His phone vibrated again. Try to rest today, he said, slipping it into his pocket. I will. Brandon kissed her and entered the private elevator. As the doors closed, Claire saw him answer the phone before the cabin began descending. His smile disappeared completely. Claire remained in the kitchen, looking toward Elliott Bay. Far below, Daniel lowered a pair of binoculars from inside his pickup truck. He watched Claire step away from the window, then unfolded a faded photograph from his wallet. A little blonde girl stood barefoot beside the Pacific Ocean, laughing as the wind lifted her hair. Daniel touched the edge of the photograph with one weathered finger. Then he looked toward the penthouse. "I'm here now, sweetheart," he said. "And this time, nobody touches you." The package arrived shortly after 8 the following morning. 3 soft knocks echoed through the penthouse. Claire looked up from a nursery catalog and checked the security monitor beside the front door. An elderly delivery driver stood in the hallway holding a plain brown box. His uniform displayed the logo of a local courier service. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked when she opened the door. "Yes." "Delivery. Signature required." Claire signed electronically. The driver handed her the package, tipped his cap, and walked toward the elevator. There was no return address, only her full name. Claire carried the package to the kitchen and carefully opened it. Inside rested a small wooden music box polished to a deep walnut finish. It looked old rather than expensive, its corners softened by years of use. She lifted the lid. A familiar lullaby filled the room. Claire stopped breathing. Her mother had played that melody during summer storms when Claire was a child. After her mother's death, Claire searched for the box but never found it. She assumed it had been lost when the family home was sold. Very few people knew the melody existed. Beneath the velvet lining, she found a folded note. "You are being watched. Trust nobody inside your home." Claire looked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Fairies moved through the morning mist. A jogger crossed the street below. Nothing appeared unusual. That made the warning more frightening. Across from the building, Daniel watched through binoculars as Claire stepped away from the glass. He had recognized the music box the moment the courier entered the building. It had belonged to Claire's mother. Until 48 hours earlier, it had been locked inside a concealed drawer in Daniel's warehouse office, along with childhood photographs, letters, and a copy of Claire's original birth certificate. Someone had broken into the office and taken only one envelope. The music box had been inside it. Daniel photographed the courier's vehicle as it pulled away, capturing the license plate and company markings. He sent both to Maya Torres. "Courier uniform may be false. Trace the plate and building access authorization." Her response arrived seconds later. "Plate belongs to a Whitmore Holdings security subcontractor. Driver entered under a maintenance credential issued by Victor Hale's office." Daniel's jaw tightened. Victor had stolen the music box and sent it to Claire. The warning was not intended to save her. It was intended to frighten her, make her appear unstable, and prepare a narrative that she had become paranoid before disappearing. At Whitmore Holdings, Brandon stood at the head of a conference table while quarterly projections filled a wall-sized screen. Investors listened as he described growth, stability, and strategic expansion. His phone vibrated. "Package delivered." Subject reacted as expected. Brandon locked the screen without changing expression. Only a few miles separated the boardroom from Claire's apartment, but the two of them were already living in different realities. Claire spent the next hour checking the apartment. She examined closets, vents, smoke detectors, and picture frames. She found nothing, yet the note had changed the meaning of every familiar object. Rather than calling Brandon, she contacted the courier company listed on the driver's uniform. The dispatcher searched the tracking number. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore," the woman said. "That number isn't in our system. Do you have a driver matching the description?" "No, ma'am." Claire thanked her and ended the call. Someone had entered her secured building using a false identity. She photographed the box and note, then uploaded the images to a private cloud account Brandon did not know existed. It was a small action, but it made her feel less helpless. That afternoon, Claire left the penthouse for a brief walk along the waterfront. Her doctor had approved gentle exercise, and she chose a busy public path where families, cyclists, and office workers passed constantly. Daniel sat on a bench feeding bread to gulls, pretending to read an old newspaper. Claire noticed him only because his face seemed familiar. She had seen him across the street twice during the previous week, though never clearly enough to be certain. Their eyes met. Daniel looked away. Claire continued walking. A young man in a dark hoodie approached from behind. He brushed against her shoulder, apologized, then reached toward the open side pocket of her handbag. Daniel moved before Claire understood what was happening. He caught the man's wrist and turned it just far enough to make him release a small electronic device. The man tore free and ran toward the street. Daniel picked up the device before Claire could see it clearly. It was not a wallet or phone. It was a tracking tag. The young man had not been trying to steal from her. He had been trying to plant something in her bag. Claire stood frozen. Daniel slipped the tag into his pocket and looked at her with concern he could no longer hide. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "you shouldn't walk alone until you know who controls your security." Claire stared at him. "How do you know my name?" Daniel glanced toward a black sedan parked across the street. A camera lens withdrew behind its tinted rear window. "Go back to your building," he said. "Use the service entrance. Don't tell anyone you spoke to me." "Who are you?" But Daniel had already turned away. By the time Claire looked toward the sedan, it was moving into traffic. She returned her attention to the bench. The old man was gone. Claire locked the penthouse door behind her and leaned against it, trying to slow her breathing. The encounter at the park had lasted less than a minute, but every detail replayed in her mind. The young man's hand near her bag, the object the stranger had picked up, the warning about her security, and the fact that he knew her name. Claire placed the music box on the kitchen island beside the photographs she had taken. She considered calling the police, but what could she report? A false courier had delivered an item from her childhood. A stranger had stopped another stranger from placing something in her handbag. Her husband's security chief might somehow be involved. Each detail sounded more improbable when separated from the others. Together, however, they formed a pattern. Claire texted Brandon, "Can you come home early? I need to speak with you." His response appeared quickly. "Board meeting ran late. Home after 9. Everything okay?" Claire typed several answers, deleted them, and finally sent, "We'll talk tonight." Across town, Brandon read the message while entering a private elevator with Victor Hale. Victor was broad-shouldered, disciplined, and nearly invisible in the way experienced security professionals often were. He had attended Claire and Brandon's wedding. He had escorted her through crowds, arranged hospital security, and carried gifts into the nursery. "The park contact failed," Victor said. Brandon's expression hardened. "Did Hayes speak to her?" "Briefly. You said he was retired." "He was. That doesn't mean he's harmless." Brandon looked at the descending floor numbers. "Then stop improvising. I need Claire disoriented, not suspicious of us." The package worked. She contacted the courier service and photographed the note. "How do you know?" Victor gave him a measured look. "Because the apartment system still belongs to us." The elevator doors opened. Neither man noticed the maintenance technician pushing a cart through the lobby. Beneath his uniform was a recording device authorized earlier that morning by a federal magistrate after Maya Torres presented evidence tying Victor's subcontractor to the murder-for-hire broker. The investigation had already begun. Several blocks away, Daniel entered the underground parking garage beneath an aging warehouse. His office occupied one corner of the second floor, hidden behind a door marked marine equipment storage. Maps covered one wall. Photographs covered another. Claire appeared in many of them, not because Daniel had recently begun watching her, but because he had followed her life from a distance for years. Graduation, wedding, charity events. The day she announced her pregnancy, Daniel had obeyed Claire's mother's final request and stayed away. But staying away had never meant forgetting. He opened the concealed drawer where the music box had been stored. The envelope was still missing. A small red fiber clung to the edge of the metal panel. Daniel removed it with tweezers and placed it in a plastic evidence sleeve. The material matched the gloves used by one of Victor's private response teams. His phone vibrated. "Private number." Daniel answered without speaking. A distorted voice said, "You made direct contact with the subject. Your operative planted a tracker on a pregnant woman in a public park. That wasn't your concern. It became my concern when he failed. The client wants confirmation that the assignment remains active." Daniel looked toward the wall of photographs. "Tell the client everything is proceeding according to schedule. You have 72 hours. The caller ended the connection. Daniel sent the recording to Maya. Broker shortened the timeline. "Victor knows I intervened." Maya called seconds later. "We traced the courier van," she said. "It belongs to North Sound Protective Services. Whitmore Holdings paid them through Harbor Crest Logistics, a shell company, one of 6. We've been investigating the transfers for months, but Claire's digital authorization appears on 3 of them. She didn't sign anything. We believe Brandon forged her credentials." Her late mother's trust owns a significant block of Whitmore holdings. Claire's signature allowed him to move restricted funds without board approval. Daniel understood immediately. If Claire learned her identity had been used, she could demand a forensic audit. The transfers would lead to Brandon, Victor, and everyone helping them move money. What about insurance? Daniel asked. We found a $50 million policy taken out on Claire 18 months ago. Brandon is the beneficiary. Daniel looked toward the rain-darkened windows. Financial exposure. Control of Claire's trust shares. Insurance money. Brandon had more than one reason to want his wife gone. That evening, Claire waited until nearly 10 before Brandon entered the penthouse. He brought flowers and an apology delivered with the effortless warmth that had once made her feel safe. I'm sorry, he said. The board meeting became complicated. Claire watched him set his phone beside the flowers. Did Victor send anyone to the apartment today? Brandon's hand paused for only a moment. Why would he? I received a package from a courier company that says it never made the delivery. Brandon gave a soft laugh. Probably a promotional service. You know how many companies have our address. It contains something that belonged to my mother. The humor disappeared from his face. What? A music box. Brandon stepped closer. Where is it? Claire studied him carefully. She had not said the box was still inside the penthouse. I gave it to the police. It was a lie. Brandon's eyes shifted toward the kitchen before returning to her. Good, he said. That was smart. Claire smiled faintly. For the first time in their marriage, she knew with certainty that her husband was frightened of something she possessed. The next morning, Claire searched the nursery closet for a box of baby blankets. Instead, she found Brandon's black leather briefcase pushed behind several storage containers. He rarely brought confidential work home. He was too careful for that. Claire would have ignored it if she had not noticed a white corner of paper protruding from the side pocket. She pulled the document free. Harbor Crest Logistics. The name meant nothing to her, but the figure printed beneath it did. $28 million. Beside the transfer authorization was a digital signature bearing Claire's name. She had never seen the document. Her pulse quickened. Claire opened the briefcase. Inside were transaction summaries connected to several companies. Harbor Crest Logistics, Meridian Coastal Partners, Evergreen Transit Consulting, and North Sound Protective Services. The last name matched the company connected to the false courier's van. A thin tablet rested beneath the folders. When Claire pressed the power button, the screen opened to an encrypted messaging application that had not timed out. One conversation remained visible. V. She found the documents sooner than expected. B. Did she copy them? V. Apartment feed shows photographs. We'll recover the phone. B. No confrontation inside the building. Keep the timeline clean. Claire's hands became cold. A new message appeared. V. Hayes interfered again. Authorization needed. Before Brandon could reply, Claire activated airplane mode and photographed the entire conversation with her own phone. She copied the files from the tablet onto a memory card, returned everything to its original position, and placed the briefcase exactly where she had found it. Then she noticed something else. The briefcase had not been hidden carelessly. It had been placed behind nursery supplies Claire used every morning. Someone wanted her to find it. Claire remembered the old man's warning. Not everyone inside your security system is working for you. Perhaps Daniel had arranged for the briefcase to be left there. Or perhaps Victor wanted her to discover selected evidence so she would panic and run. Claire refused to do either. She called the building concierge and asked who had entered the penthouse during the previous 24 hours. Only the smart home maintenance team, he replied. Mr. Hale authorized them yesterday afternoon. Claire's eyes moved across the living room. Did they say what they repaired? The internal camera network. After ending the call, she examined the decorative objects near the fireplace. A framed wedding photograph stood slightly crooked. Brandon never left anything crooked. Behind the frame was a tiny black device with a pulsing green light. Claire did not touch it. She photographed it, disabled Wi-Fi on her phone, and used a cellular hotspot to upload the images and copy documents to her private account. Then she searched the device model. It transmitted live audio and video to a receiver within 5 miles. Someone had been watching the interior of her home in real time. Claire opened Washington's corporate registry and searched Harbor Crest Logistics. The filing listed Brandon as an authorizing director and Claire as a trust representative. Her signature had been forged. The next company led to a vacant office outside Tacoma. Another used a mailbox rental service. North Sound Protective Services listed Victor Hale as an undisclosed managing partner through a holding company. Claire stared at the screen. The evidence did not merely suggest Brandon had lied about business. It suggested he had used her identity to move millions of dollars. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. Do not confront him. The camera behind the photograph is not the only device. Take the music box and the copied records. Pier 17. 10 tomorrow morning. Use the public parking garage and leave through the west entrance. Claire read the message twice. Then she typed, "How do I know I can trust you?" The response arrived immediately. "You don't. That is why I chose a public place and why federal agents will know where you are." A second message contained the name and office number of Special Agent Maya Torres. Claire called from her cellular connection. A woman answered. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Torres. Claire hesitated. "My name is Claire Whitmore." Maya's voice changed, not dramatically, but enough to confirm the name mattered. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you in a safe location?" "I don't know. Do not speak freely inside your apartment. Take only what you can carry without drawing attention. Tomorrow's meeting is real. I will have agents positioned nearby, but they will remain out of sight unless you are in immediate danger." "Who is the man contacting me?" "He has information about a credible threat against you." "That isn't what I asked." Maya paused. "He says his name is Daniel Hayes." The name meant nothing to Claire. Yet when she repeated it silently, something old and distant stirred inside her memory. A voice singing during a storm. Strong hands lifting her toward the ocean. And a man whose face had been removed from every family photograph she owned. Claire behaved normally that evening. She ate dinner with Brandon. She asked about his meetings. She laughed when he described an investor who never stopped talking. She let him place one hand against her stomach when the baby moved. Every familiar gesture had become part of a performance. Halfway through dinner, Claire noticed Brandon's wedding ring beside his plate. "You took it off," she said. He glanced down. For the briefest instant, surprise crossed his face. "I wash my hands before dinner. You usually put it back on." Brandon slid the ring onto his finger. "There. Crisis solved." Claire smiled. "No crisis." Later, Brandon brought her sparkling water and suggested they spend the weekend at their house on Whidbey Island. The proposal sounded romantic. Claire knew the property sat near a private dock, miles from the nearest neighbor. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow evening." "So soon?" "I thought getting away might help you relax." Claire looked directly into his eyes. "That sounds perfect." Relief flickered across his face. She had just confirmed the timeline. After Brandon fell asleep, Claire quietly entered the nursery. She placed the music box, copied records, memory card, and several childhood photographs into a small hospital bag. To anyone reviewing the apartment cameras, it would appear she was preparing for the baby. At 9 the next morning, she told Brandon she had a prenatal appointment. He kissed her goodbye. "I'll have Victor send a driver. I already requested one through the clinic." Brandon's smile tightened. "You shouldn't travel alone. The clinic driver will meet me downstairs." Claire left before he could argue. The vehicle waiting outside belonged to the FBI. Maya Torres sat in the rear passenger seat wearing a plain dark coat. She was in her early 40s, composed and direct. "We swept the bag," Maya said after Claire entered. The music box contained a dormant tracking transmitter. It activated whenever the lid opened, so they could follow it. "Yes, we removed the transmitter and placed it in a decoy vehicle headed toward Whidbey Island." Claire looked through the rear window. "Brandon wanted me at the island tonight." "We know." Victor reserved a boat through another shell company. The confirmation made Claire's stomach tighten. What was supposed to happen? "We believe they intended to stage an accident. The boat would be recovered. You would not." Claire rested both hands protectively against her unborn child. Maya continued gently. "The meeting at the pier is your choice." Daniel agreed to surrender his weapons and submit to a search. "Agents will be close." "Is he dangerous?" "He was." "That isn't reassuring." "No," Maya admitted. "But he brought us the contract on your life, the broker recording and evidence linking Victor to the courier. Without him, we would not know how advanced the plan had become." Fog drifted across Pier 17 when Claire arrived. The FBI placed agents in nearby vehicles and inside a harbor office overlooking the dock. Daniel waited beside an abandoned warehouse. He wore the same faded cap and brown jacket. Claire stopped several feet away. "Who are you?" Daniel did not approach. He removed a silver pocket watch and placed it on a wooden crate between them. Claire opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph of herself as a little girl sitting on the shoulders of a younger version of the man standing before her. Her breathing stopped. She had seen another copy of the photograph in her mother's belongings, but the man's face had been torn away. Daniel removed a sealed letter. "Your mother wrote this before she died." Claire stared at him. "My father died before I was born." "No," Daniel said. "That was the story your mother used to keep you safe. Why would she need to protect me from my own father? Not from me. From the people trying to reach me through you." He placed an old federal identification card beside the watch. The photograph showed Daniel decades younger. The agency name had been partially removed, but the Department of Justice seal remained visible. "I worked undercover against an international weapons and money laundering network," he explained. "When the operation collapsed, several men escaped. Your mother and I received proof that they knew about you. She entered a protected relocation program. I disappeared and let the world believe I was dead. You could have come back. I tried after the last threat was cleared. Your mother refused. She believed any contact would reopen the danger. Before she died, she made me promise I would wait until you were old enough to choose for yourself. I'm 32. Pain crossed Daniel's face. "I waited too long." Claire's eyes filled with anger and tears. "You watched my wedding?" "Yes." "My graduation?" "Yes." "You knew I was pregnant?" Daniel nodded. "Then why did it take someone hiring you to kill me before you finally spoke?" "Because staying away had become easier than asking you to forgive me." The honesty hurt more than an excuse would have. Before Claire could respond, sunlight flashed from a warehouse window beyond the fog. Daniel saw it first. He crossed the distance between them and pulled Claire behind a reinforced concrete column as a shot shattered the wooden railing. Federal agents shouted from both ends of the pier. A second shot struck the warehouse wall. Daniel shielded Claire with his body while Maya's team moved toward the building. An agent guided Claire into an armored vehicle. Daniel remained beside her rather than joining the pursuit. Minutes later, Maya received a radio update. "The shooter abandoned the rifle and escaped through a service tunnel," she said. "But we recovered the weapon and a vehicle registered to North Sound Protective Services." "Victor," Claire whispered. Daniel looked toward the shattered railing. "Yes." Maya's phone rang. She listened briefly, then turned to Claire. "Brandon just told Victor to move the island plan forward tonight." Claire's fear hardened into something clearer. "Resolve. Then let him believe I'm still going." The FBI moved Claire to a secure medical residence outside Seattle. A physician examined her and confirmed that both she and the baby were unharmed. Daniel remained in a separate interview room for nearly 3 hours, answering questions about his past, the broker, and every step he had taken since accepting the contract. When Claire finally entered, he was seated at a metal table with his hands visible. The contract file lay between him and Maya Torres. Daniel pushed it toward Claire. "A broker contacted me 3 weeks ago," he said. "Victor chose me because he believed I had no personal connection to Seattle and because my old reputation made me useful." Claire opened the file. Her photograph, medical appointments, security codes, the route to Whidbey Island, a description of the boat. At the bottom was a payment schedule approved through Harbor Crest Logistics. Brandon's handwritten initials appeared beside the final authorization. "He didn't meet you?" Claire asked. "No. Victor handled every operational detail. Brandon believed distance would protect him." Daniel placed several photographs on the table. They showed Victor meeting the broker, paying the false courier, directing the young man from the park, and entering Daniel's warehouse. "The man who approached you in the park was not a thief," Daniel said. "He was ordered to plant a tracker and copy the identification signal from your phone." "And the music box?" "Victor stole it from my office. He also stole letters from your mother and enough information to understand what the melody meant to you." "Why send me a warning?" Maya answered. "To create evidence that you were frightened and behaving irrationally. Victor expected you to call friends, cancel appointments, and leave the penthouse without security. After the planned boating accident, Brandon could claim you had become unstable." Claire looked at the contract again. "Did Brandon know about the baby?" Daniel's expression changed. The broker asked him directly. His response was included in the original recording. Maya placed headphones beside Claire. "You do not have to listen." Claire put them on. Victor's voice came first. "The pregnancy complicates the timeline." Then Brandon answered. "It It also makes the accident more believable. People will assume she lost control or became ill. Claire removed the headphones before the recording ended. The man she had loved had discussed the death of their unborn child as a useful detail. Daniel looked away, giving her privacy even though there was nowhere private to go. Maya opened another folder. We also confirmed the financial motive. Brandon used your credentials to authorize $46 million in fraudulent transfers. An outside audit was scheduled to contact you next week. If you denied signing the documents, the scheme would collapse. And the insurance policy? $50 million, plus temporary voting control over the shares held in your family trust. Your disappearance would have delayed probate and given Brandon enough time to complete the merger. Claire wiped her tears and looked through the documents again. What do you need from me? Maya hesitated. We have evidence against Victor and the broker. We can arrest them now. Against Brandon, we have financial crimes and circumstantial evidence of the conspiracy. Daniel's recording helps, but Brandon never used your name during the original call. His defense attorneys will argue Victor acted independently. He won't confess to you. No. Claire looked toward the dark window. But he might confess to me. Daniel immediately shook his head. No, Claire turned to him. You accepted the contract because you believed it was the only way to get close enough to protect me. Yes. Then understand this. I am not spending the rest of my life hiding while other people decide what happens to me. You're 7 months pregnant. I'm also the person whose identity he stole, whose child he targeted, and whose trust he used to fund his crimes. Daniel fell silent. Claire looked at Maya. Can you monitor a meeting legally? With court authorization and your consent? Yes. Given the evidence and the attempt at the pier, a judge will approve it. Then we make Brandon believe I escaped from you and want to negotiate. Maya studied her. What would you ask him? The questions only his wife would know how to make him answer. That evening, Claire called Brandon from a number the FBI allowed Victor's network to trace. Brandon answered immediately. Claire, where are you? Daniel told me everything. A long silence followed. Daniel is manipulating you. I have the Harbor Crest documents. I have the tablet messages. I know about Whidbey Island. Brandon's breathing changed. Listen to me. You are in danger. I know. Tell me where you are. I will give you the documents. In exchange, you transfer money into an account I control and let me leave Seattle. You don't understand what those files mean. I understand enough to destroy Whitmore Holdings. Another silence. Then Brandon's voice became colder. Where do you want to meet? Claire named the rooftop garden of the hotel where they had celebrated their first wedding anniversary. No Victor, she said. No security. Just you. I'll come alone. After ending the call, Claire looked at Maya. He lied. Maya nodded. Victor's phone began moving before Brandon even hung up. Daniel examined the rooftop plans. He'll place Victor close enough to intervene. Good, Claire said. Then we can end this with both of them. By late afternoon, federal agents had secured the hotel without alerting the staff or guests. Officers occupied adjoining rooms, service corridors, and the maintenance level beneath the rooftop garden. A court-authorized transmitter was hidden beneath the collar of Claire's coat. A medical team waited 1 floor below. Daniel studied the surveillance monitors while Maya reviewed the arrest plan. You stay in the control room, Maya told him. You are not part of the confrontation. Daniel looked toward the screen, showing Claire waiting beside the rooftop fountain. If he touches her, my agents will move. Daniel's hands tightened. For most of his life, he had survived by acting before anyone else. Now protecting Claire required him to trust her judgment and remain still. At exactly 7, Brandon entered the rooftop garden. He wore a charcoal suit and no overcoat despite the cold wind. His expression softened when he saw Claire. Thank God, he said. I've been looking everywhere. Claire did not move toward him. Were you? Victor said Daniel kidnapped you. Victor also sent me my mother's music box. Brandon stopped. I don't know anything about that. He stole it from Daniel's office. Then he sent a false courier into our building using a credential from your company. Victor handles security. I don't approve every decision. You approved Harbor Crest. Brandon's face became guarded. Claire held up a memory card. I copied the transfers, the tablet messages, and the documents bearing my forged signature. You don't understand those transactions. Then explain them. They were temporary financing arrangements. Why did you need my signature? The trust restrictions were outdated. I did what was necessary to protect the company. You stole $46 million. I moved money to keep thousands of people employed. And the insurance policy? Brandon looked toward the skyline. All wealthy families carry policies. $50 million, payable to you after my death or presumed death. His eyes returned to her. Daniel has filled your head with lies. Claire let her voice tremble, not because she was pretending, but because the next question forced her to confront what she already knew. Did you tell Victor to put me on that boat? Brandon said nothing. Did you choose Whidbey Island because no one would hear me? Claire, did you know our son would die with me? Brandon stepped closer. You were never supposed to learn any of this. The sentence carried across the transmitter. In the control room, Maya signaled her agents to remain in position. Claire continued. So it's true. Brandon lowered his voice. I was trapped. You were audited. The merger would have collapsed. The banks would have taken everything. The board would have blamed me. The employees would have lost their jobs, and your trust would have become worthless. You could have told me. You would have demanded an investigation. Yes. And that would have destroyed us. No, Brandon. It would have exposed you. For the first time, anger broke through his polished exterior. You enjoyed the life I built. The penthouse. The galas. The foundation. You never asked what it cost to maintain any of it. I asked questions. That's why you decided I had to disappear. Brandon's gaze shifted toward the rooftop entrance. Victor was not visible, but Claire knew he was nearby. She took one step away from Brandon. Tell me what was supposed to happen. Give me the memory card. Tell me. Brandon exhaled. Victor was supposed to make the boat look damaged. Your car would be found near the dock. The messages and the music box would support the story that you had become frightened and unstable. And my body? His silence answered. Claire's eyes filled with tears. You planned all of it. I authorized an accident, he said. I never wanted details. You told Victor the pregnancy made it more believable. Brandon's face changed. He now understood she had heard the recording. Daniel gave you that. Yes. He was hired to kill you. He accepted the contract to save me. Brandon laughed once, without humor. You believe a retired killer suddenly became a loving father? He came back. The answer landed harder than Claire expected. Brandon looked toward the entrance again. Victor! He shouted. No one appeared. Brandon reached inside his jacket. Claire stepped back. Federal agents emerged from behind the glass pavilion and rooftop doors. Hands where we can see them. Brandon froze. The object inside his jacket was not a weapon. It was a phone. Agents forced his hands away from his body and placed him in restraints. Maya approached. Brandon Whitmore, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation of murder, wire fraud, money laundering, and identity fraud. Brandon stared at Claire. You set me up. Claire's voice remained steady. No. I asked questions. You answered them. A second team entered through the service stairwell with Victor Hale in handcuffs. Officers had arrested him after finding a suppressed firearm, the Whidbey Island boat reservation, and a remote receiver connected to the cameras inside Claire's apartment. Victor looked toward Brandon with open contempt. You said she would panic. Brandon said nothing. As agents led them toward the elevator, Daniel entered the rooftop garden. He had removed the faded cap. Brandon recognized him only after seeing Claire's eyes and Daniel's face. You, Brandon whispered. Daniel stopped several feet away. You hired a stranger, he said. You never bothered to learn who he was. Brandon looked from Daniel to Claire. Understanding arrived too late. He's your father. Claire stood beside Daniel. Yes. Brandon's composure finally collapsed. You don't know what he is. Claire looked at the man who had spent years hiding from her and then risked everything to return. I know what he chose to do when it mattered. The elevator doors closed on Brandon Whitmore's perfect public image. Below them, federal vehicles waited beneath the Seattle rain. The investigation spread quickly. Whitmore Holdings announced Brandon's suspension before midnight. By the end of the week, the board had removed him as chief executive and appointed an independent committee to cooperate with federal prosecutors. Victor Hale agreed to provide evidence against Brandon after investigators connected him to the courier, the tracking device, the hidden apartment cameras, the staged robbery, and the rifle recovered near Pier 17. The young man from the park was arrested 2 days later. He admitted he had been paid to plant a tracker and steal Claire's phone if he had the opportunity. The sniper was identified through traffic cameras and financial transfers from North Sound Protective Services. The questions that had once surrounded Claire now had answers. The music box had come from Daniel's office. The warning note had been part of Victor's plan to make her appear frightened and unstable. The hidden devices had been installed during a fake smart home maintenance visit. The forged documents had allowed Brandon to move money through shell companies. The island trip had been the planned final step. Nothing had been random. Months later, Brandon entered guilty pleas to federal financial crimes after a judge ruled that Claire's recorded rooftop conversation and the monitoring operation were lawful. He later faced a state trial for the murder conspiracy. Claire testified for nearly 4 hours. She did not describe Brandon as a monster. She described him as a man who repeatedly chose reputation over honesty, control over love, and self-preservation over the lives of his wife and child. That truth proved more devastating than anger. Brandon was convicted. Victor received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, though the court rejected his attempt to portray himself as a man merely following orders. Whitmore Holdings recovered a large portion of the stolen funds. Claire used her voting rights to install an independent board, protect employees who had no role in Brandon's crimes, and sell the divisions connected to the shell company network. She refused to let the company keep carrying her family name. 3 weeks before Claire's due date, Daniel gave her the final letter written by her mother. They sat beside the window of a small rented home overlooking Puget Sound. Claire no longer wanted the penthouse. Too many rooms contained memories of being watched. She opened the letter carefully. "My dearest Claire, your father is not dead. I told you that because I was afraid the danger surrounding him would become the danger surrounding you. Daniel agreed to disappear because he loved you more than he wanted to be remembered. I believed silence would protect us. Perhaps it did for a time. But silence also creates its own wounds. When you are old enough to choose, I hope you will judge him not only by the years he was absent, but by what he does when he is finally given the chance to return." Claire read the letter twice. Daniel sat across the room, giving her space. "You should have come sooner," she said. "I know. You should have trusted me with the truth. I know. I don't know how long it will take me to forgive you." Daniel nodded. "I'm not asking you to do it quickly." Claire folded the letter. "But you can stay." For a man who had survived gunfire, betrayal, and decades of hiding, those 3 words nearly broke him. Their relationship did not repair itself overnight. Daniel attended counseling with Claire. He answered questions even when the answers made him ashamed. He told her about the work he had done, the people he had hurt, and the fear that had become an excuse for staying away. Claire did not romanticize his past. She also refused to erase the choice he had made to save her. When labor began during a July thunderstorm, Daniel drove Claire to the hospital while Maya Torres followed in another car. Hours later, a healthy baby boy entered the world. Claire named him Samuel Daniel Whitmore. Daniel stood near the hospital window, uncertain whether he belonged close enough to touch the child. Claire looked toward him. "Dad." It was the first time she had called him that without fear or confusion. Daniel approached the bed. Claire placed Samuel into his arms. The baby opened his eyes briefly, then wrapped one tiny hand around Daniel's finger. Daniel bowed his head as tears moved silently down his face. Outside, thunder rolled across Elliott Bay. Claire remembered the question Daniel had asked before accepting the contract. Does she still smile when she talks about the ocean? A week after leaving the hospital, Claire brought Samuel to the Washington coast. Daniel walked beside her along the wet sand while waves moved beneath a clearing sky. For the first time in 26 years, Claire told him what she remembered. The striped beach umbrella, the lullaby during storms, the way he lifted her above the waves. Daniel listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, she looked toward the horizon and smiled. Some fortunes are measured in buildings, companies, and numbers written on financial statements. Others are measured in moments that almost disappeared forever. Daniel Hayes had spent most of his life believing he was too late to recover what he had lost. Standing beside his daughter and grandson at the edge of the ocean, he finally understood that redemption did not erase the past. It simply meant being present for every future moment he was still allowed to have.